Iska, what the hell's a Fleta Deadlift?
Ooh. Oh, this is my grandpa awakening moment, okay? This is asking my grandpa like what was the Great Depression like or something like this, okay? This is a story that in esports terms is quite far in the past. It goes back to 2016, okay?
Oh my god, like the Dark Ages.
Yeah, actual Dark Ages. Like it's of course before the inception of the Overwatch League, okay?
Of course, yeah.
And as it may, a lot of it has survived, and it's sort of happened in the co-emergence of Overwatch statistics
Sure.
and the guy that would later on become the Overwatch League Season 3 MVP, Fleta. So Fleta played for a god-awful team called Flashlucks in OGN's Apex. And they were in Apex for, I believe, Season 1 to Season 4. Okay. Fleta was only with them really for Season 2 and Season 3. And in Season 1, they won one match, and that was the only one they ever won in the Apex series, okay? Bad, okay? A bad team, okay?
Just to really labor the point. Bad.
A torture device for any aspiring hyper carry player, okay?
Sure.
So, Flashluck's really disappointing, brings in Fleta, really promising player. Second season, they once again win nothing, okay? That doesn't mean that Fleta didn't perform. This guy was the epitome of Sisyphus, and that team was a stone the size of a Jupiter moon. It might have been the size of Europa, potentially Callisto Ganymede, okay? Like, these guys were heavy as hell.
Okay,
right?
Okay. We're getting, like, just in case anyone's not up on their Greek myths, Sisyphus is the guy who pushes the big roller up a hill and can never quite get it to top. And he rolls back down, and he's doomed to do that for eternity. So you're essentially saying Fleta's a guy pushing a rock to up a hill. Flash looks at the rock, and OGN Apex is the massive hill, basically.
Yes, pretty much, yeah. Insane effort by that guy, okay? At the same time, another thing happened, which is now general manager of the Vancouver Titans, Baroy, and a couple of other folks come up with Winston's Lab. Winston's Lab was an analytics and statistics website for Overwatch. But not only that, Baroy also derived a lot of useful statistics that we still use, right? And ways in how we think about Overwatch, okay?
Okay.
On top of that, this was in the advent of Overwatch League, okay? And we loved ourselves a little money ball. If you've been around since that time, you will hate this word. If you've not been around, you might have not even seen the movie, okay? The Moneyball approach is basically like to find these statistical outliers in the data and get a player for cheap. And I looked at some of the statistics, right? And one of the bigger ones was, of course, final blows. To this day, we love a bit of good of cool kill feed information, right? Like if name pops up, dopamine shoots out, right? Like
exactly, yeah. That's always been the play.
The good old. Now, it also turns out it is pretty informative of who's a good player on the DPS role. And at the time, keep in mind, this is still 6v6, right? Still sure. Overwatch 1 and whatnot. Also, who's doing their job correctly, right? Now, usually, there were some interesting patterns to observe, like which teams got more kill share from their tanks, which teams got more kill share from their DPS. And Baroy was really fundamental in trying to figure out styles. And it turned out that teams who, during the Apex era, who had more kill share on their tanks and supports, comparatively, actually did better. Now, I was looking at these stats, specifically for Apex Season 2 and Apex Season 3. And there was one guy that in the kill share, I thought it was a bug first. Okay. Like I thought that couldn't be the case, right? There was a guy that, yes, by the eye test was really good, but by the statistics was insane, and that was Fleta. Okay.
Of course.
So keep in mind, once again, just to reiterate, this is 6v6. And in some maps, and even one match, Fleta had more kills than his entire rest of the team combined. Okay? One player has more kills, or final blows, than 5 of his teammates. Now keep in mind, this is still during a time where off-tanks are doing a lot, right? Like doing a lot of damage, doing a lot of kills. The Annas still had like great outputs. There were still Zenyatas, you remember the Jonex getting a lot of kill share. Like there was theoretically all in the game. No, this guy was hard carrying. Once again, Sisyphus moment, right? Now, whether or not it was part of my admiration for Fleta, or a smidge disappointment for everyone else on this team, right? Like, I thought, like, what would be a smidge edgy, little clever double entendre on what Fleta is doing there. So you have, on the one hand, the deadlift, the workout exercise form, right?
Absolutely,
like someone that can lift heavy weights, once again, Sisyphus, but also who's dead? Definitely the rest of his team, okay? Like, those were all dead weight.
Absolutely.
Like, wrote an article about it. Like, it got some traction. Now, the reason why it really got into the Overwatch esports community vernacular was, I believe, and I didn't verify this, but he was the stats producer guy at the time. It's Captain Planet. He's now, I believe, still part of Team 4 proper. And he produced stats for the Overwatch League. And he took the Fleta deadlift and actually got rid of all my sloppy mistakes. I remember, like, my Fleta deadlift write-up had, like, he deadlifted in one match and then one map, but I really didn't differentiate between the two.
Okay.
And he also lost both matches. So, right, like, if you get 2 kills and your team combined gets 1, you just got stomped. It's not really super impressive. That's not what happened with Fleta, but theoretically, like, by that definition, it's not really the greatest, right?
Yeah.
So what Captain Planet did was take this and really refine it and say, what is a meaningful statistic, the Fleta deadlift, and say, yes, you have to have 50% of your team's final blows, but you also have to win the map. Now, the Fleta deadlift is theoretically still here, right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit different because it's 5v5, so it's theoretically less impressive.
Yeah, it's easier to do now, right?
It is theoretically easier to do, yes. It's also, could argue, maybe the roles made it so that maybe it's not as hard, as hard for DPS because they get more kill share now because there's no off-tank to really steal those.
Sure.
So it's not the same difficulty. That said, it's not accomplished that often still, right? Like, it's still a pretty strong feat. And of course, at the same time, like, while all this was happening, Fleta also gained traction. Like, his talent was recognized. He was brought onto the Seoul Dynasty for Season 1. They won Seoul Cup together. The catharsis from this moment of having championed this guy, finally getting onto a good team and instantly winning the first competition that he was part of, and finally having been set free from... Like, this man walked into this Seoul Dynasty room just jacked from the workouts that he did, okay?
I mean, do you think like your involvement in having it, if you invented this, let's give you credit. You basically invented this stat, named it after someone who was great on a not great team. Let's face it, Fleta could have just disappeared into the ether of former professional Overwatch players, but he didn't. So, I think you could claim some personal responsibility for Fleta's career as it stands today.
I'm not sure if that's how it works, but it's just there's a certain quality of player where, like, if you have followed FPS games long enough, you just see it. You just know this guy got it, right? And if he can demonstrate it over a longer period of time where you can be sure that he also has the work ethic to do it, then it's a shoo-in. Okay, like, it's just going to happen. At the end of the day, most people voted for Fleta as MVP in Season 3, so he got recognition there. And yeah, became an integral part of the Overwatch League history. Now, you know how the saying goes, right? You either die an MVP or see yourself become the tank deadweight.
Uh-huh.
And ironically, this season, Fleta was put onto the tank role and became part of the stone, okay? He was heavy, okay? But to be fair, like there's still such a surplus of carry. Like he can feed for at least 3 or 4 more seasons before it's even remotely, leveled out.
Legacy is in danger, yeah.
Yes. Still one of the greatest players of all time, and huge contribution, of course, both in the ability and also, like, honestly, as a character in Overwatch.
Absolutely. So, like, when you say, let's just take it back to like how rare a Fleta deadlift is. I think I remember reading, so in the research for this video, that by 2021, Fleta's an established character by then. In the Overwatch League, I think he had managed it once. Like he'd managed one Fleta deadlift in the Overwatch League by that point. Just to really kind of, hit home how rare they were. Even the guy it's named after doesn't do it that often. To
be fair, he also was on much better teams. It's not actually a desirable thing to score that
no,
Fleta deadlift,
true.
Okay? You do not want to be the player that gets at the Fleta deadlift, okay? That's the guy that will sit at the other table at dinner because he's mad at the teammates. It's not a thing that should happen.
I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I guess it just kind of sells how much of a team game Overwatch actually is, and that you can be a carry, but actually getting that many kills in a game and so much more kills in a game than your team and winning is so hard, so difficult to actually pull off.
Yes, and I agree. Like I think people in the comments will say, well, he probably got a lot of resources and was that's all probably true, but that was part of the defining criteria for the deadlift. That it happens so rarely that no matter what you think, how muddy the data there is and how much like resources flowed into this guy, it is such a difference that there cannot be enough noise to justify that as a viable strategy, right? It's not that everyone just like it's the best strategy for this team to just put everything into this guy and then they carry, and the Fleta deadlift is actually the best strategy for them to. That's never the case. No. The difference is too huge. If anything, like maybe like 35, 40%, that's even in compositions where it's really obviously about the one DPS players. I'm thinking Bastion. Bastion comes there, the Bastion gets a lot of the kills. Even there, it should not be remotely close to those Fleta deadlift numbers. So like the stat is so seldomly achieved that it's never optimal. Always an expression of this player's like prowess over a certain threshold of kills. If you only get 3 kills a map, yeah, but you're also not winning in that case anyway.
No, exactly,
so,
yeah.
It is in all cases, it's both an achievement and just a complete flop by the rest of the team. Okay.
So here's a question for you. So obviously you've invented one Overwatch stat, and we wouldn't possibly ask you to invent another, but if you could, are there any other stats that you think should be taken into account in Overwatch League statistics that deserve a name? Because we've spoken about language and kind of how the language of stats needs to be a bit more, I don't know, sexy
yes.
in the Overwatch League and in Overwatch. So like, is there one that you have in mind that you wish people would focus
on? I'm not sure where I would set the threshold.
Okay.
And I think getting more language right and framing right is going to be the way to make Overwatch fun for a wider audience. I think finding the right ways to talk about things. And in statistics, the one thing that I think is always a little bit underappreciated is the stat of first kills and first death. It takes, at least from what I remember, at least 3 or 4 ultimates if you concede the first fight to get even on win percentages, right?
Right.
Losing your first guy is huge. Someone who gets like 30% first kills, that is insane. That's a game-winning player, okay? So 30% of the fight is now 80% won for that team. 80% is around the stat. I think the last time I looked at it, when you score the first kill, 80% of the time you will win the fight. Right? Is a really impactful stat. It's not super cool because knowing that statistic in my mind, I see this first kill scored. I look at the ults and basically almost get myself a coffee because I know where it's going. Okay, like it's not the greatest way to enjoy Overwatch, but what it does do is if I stay in front of my computer and I see someone clutch up and actually come back from a great deficit, I think that's an incredible feat, right? Like I enjoy it more just because I know it is actually impossible. Okay, like it statistically should not happen what I just saw, and that makes me enjoy those moments more. And whenever a team comes down like in a 2v5 or whatever, it's both like, yes, it's a blunder by the team that had the numbers advantage. It should not happen in a game like Overwatch, but Jesus Christ, do the two players have to clutch up in order to make that happen. The same thing happened, by the way, for the Los Angeles Gladiators against the Chengdu Hunters in Season 4 when they won the first stage.
Yes.
And they, like, Shu, just gets an incredible clutch. They should have no business winning this fight. This guy just makes it happen. And those, like, knowing the statistics and knowing the importance of first kills and first death actually enhances the flavor. So if anyone was to flesh this out and find a salient threshold for the first kills, first death, I think this tells such a huge story that we're not really clearly appreciating in how Overwatch is played. Therefore, first kill, first death, still super robust.
Well, you've heard it here. Stats, they're sexy. Get into them. And someone drill down into first kills. And, well, maybe we'll do that at some point, but someone else also maybe try and do it. We'll work together. So thank you as always, Yiska. I now know what a Fleta Deadlift is, and Overwatch stats are indeed sexy.
They are. They're very much.
So obviously, if we're going to be doing this a lot, we're going to be talking to. I will be talking to Yiska and asking him lots of questions about the Overwatch League and Overwatch in general to get his insight, so that a nasty platinum player like me can one day hope to understand everything that is happening in the Overwatch League. Even though I watch it regularly and still don't necessarily understand everything that happens.
Sometimes even the general managers don't.
If you want to talk about that, check out our previous video where we talk about the playoff bracket. So yeah, if you have anything that you want to, which I think we decided on was hashtag Ask Yiska in the last video, leave it in the comments.
Going against my humility there.
Any questions that you want to hear Yiska talk about, that you want to hear us chatting about, or anything you've always been curious about in the Overwatch League or in Overwatch in general, let us know and we will talk about it. But in the meantime, Yiska, thank you.
Thanks a ton.